bang, bang, boom.
तो अभी हमने ना एक मूवी देखी ऑशविट्ज़ के बारे में कि क्या था उधर। इस मूवी में ना हमें बताया कि ऑशविट्ज़ क्या है और कैसे ऑशविट्ज़ बना। अब हम आगे देखते हैं क्या होता है। तो यहाँ पे थिएटर था।
Right now? Right now? Yes, so let me come back to my earlier commentary. So initially, Auschwitz was established initially only as a place of incarceration, a concentration camp, and the terrorist groups of those brought through a mass transport of those who were published people. But also starting in 1942, Auschwitz started to function as what we call a death camp, when the Nazis began mass deportations to Auschwitz of Jewish people, deportations of entire Jewish communities, and among Jewish people deported here, the great majority were killed right after arrival, killed in gas chambers. So we can say from that time Auschwitz had two functions simultaneously. It was still a concentration camp as it was originally created, but Auschwitz also became what we call a death camp, a place of mass murder of Jewish people. So before we enter this place, let me also emphasize, because right now we are in Auschwitz 1, so Auschwitz 1, because Auschwitz it became that entire complex of camps. So later today we will visit Birkenau, Auschwitz to Birkenau, but also in addition to that place, Auschwitz 1 and Birkenau, the Nazis they created almost 50 satellite camps of Auschwitz. You may imagine some of the places where the prisoners worked, they were located some distance from here. For example, some industrial sites like factories or coal mines. So the Nazis they also housed some prisoners of Auschwitz in satellite camps that were created close to such different places of slave labor. So Auschwitz over time it became that entire complex of camps. So here about the entrance gate in Auschwitz 1, we are approaching, you can see ahead of us, about the gate, we can see that inscription in German, Arbeit macht frei. So work makes you free, work sets you free, Arbeit macht frei. You may imagine that was a very cynical message for the people incarcerated here, what didn't reflect the reality of this place. You can imagine work, slave labor, that wasn't really intended to liberate anyone here. We can say quite the contrary, that was the main method of exploiting the prisoners. So in that sense, that inscription conveyed a very cynical message, defeat. So here you can notice we are entering that area surrounded by double fence, by 2 rows of a barbed wire fence. But let's remember, so the prisoners kept here in Auschwitz 1, many prisoners they worked in the vicinity outside the fence. For example, in some nearby workshops or factories within walking distance, some agricultural farms or construction sites. So actually, what was a part of a daily routine, what was that after a morning roll call when prisoners assembled, so after a roll call there was an order given that prisoners would join working groups to which they belonged, and so later, according to that, the prisoners in rows of 5, they would march through this gate where we have just entered. They were counted by the Nazis, by the SS men. And that took place in the rhythm of music, marching music that was played by the orchestra. So here in a moment we will see on the photograph that orchestra here in Auschwitz. You may imagine, so among people incarcerated here, there were people representing different walks of life. So also some talented musicians, professional musicians, some of them became members of that orchestra. So we can see on the photograph of that orchestra here in Auschwitz. You may imagine, of course, so not only did they have to play that marching music in the morning with working groups of inmates leaving the camp, but also that orchestra played marching music when prisoners, when they came back to the camp from places of work. You may imagine how, especially then, when prisoners came back to the camp from places of work, they would do so typically not only very exhausted, emaciated, but also often they had to carry with them, bring to the camp the bodies of injured or deceased prisoners, those who didn't manage to survive the raid. So around us you can see on our way 28 such two-story brick buildings. We will approach in a moment block number 4, which is the first exhibition building that we will visit, block 4. So later we will come back to that exact place where you can see us now, where you can see this road in this place. We will come back to this location, but first we'll approach block number 4 and we'll enter those buildings, other buildings belonging to the main exhibition. However, let's also stop here for a moment. Before we enter block number 4, you can see how after the camp's establishment, what was ordered, those were additional construction works. We can see on this painting by Władysław Siwek, a Polish artist, survivor of Auschwitz, you can see the prisoners digging foundations for block 15. That exact same building you can see to my left, block number 15. So specifically buildings numbered 15 to 18, and also blocks you will see behind me, blocks 4 to 7, they were built after the camp's establishment. So not only were there new buildings erected here, 2-story brick buildings, but also to every 1-story building there was an additional story other. Most of the buildings that were taken over here, the buildings of former military barracks that were taken over, those were only 1-story buildings. So what we can see around us, such buildings numbered from 1 to 28, those are mostly buildings in which prisoners lived, but also some buildings had other functions, for example of warehouses or offices. Block number 11 that we will later visit, that was the camp's prison, or also on our way we will pass buildings of what was the hospital here in Auschwitz, but mostly we can see around us buildings in which prisoners were housed, including block number 4, but block number 4, as I mentioned earlier, it is one of the buildings which became exhibition buildings when that place became that memorial site after the liberation. So we can say not long after the liberation, a bit over 2 years after Auschwitz had been liberated, that place became officially that memorial site covering the grounds of Auschwitz I, where we are now in Birkenau, which we will later visit. So interior of some of buildings that was adapted to house of exhibition rooms where we can learn more about the history of this place. So although block number 4 it is also one of buildings in which prisoners lived, we will see those living conditions for prisoners later today. In block number 7 we will see living conditions from the time of the camp's operation. So block 4, it is now that first building belonging to the main exhibition. So about the entrance to block number 4, you will notice that exhibition has that title, Extermination. Let me emphasize, among the people who brought to Auschwitz, actually the great majority of people who brought to Auschwitz, they didn't even become prisoners, but they were killed right after arrival. As I mentioned earlier, the Nazis they carried out mass killings in Auschwitz in gas chambers. So here in Auschwitz I, we will enter the building that was the crematorium with the gas chamber here in Auschwitz I. But when Birkenau came into existence, the Nazis gradually moved that process of mass killings to Birkenau, where they later built a far bigger crematoria with gas chambers in Birkenau. But all of such crematoria in Birkenau, they were destroyed before the liberation. In Birkenau, there are only ruins of the crematoria left preserved, but by far the great majority of victims of Auschwitz, they were killed in Birkenau. In this sense, we can say Birkenau became that main site of mass killings within that Auschwitz complex of camps. So we'll enter block 4 in a moment. We'll approach first before we can enter. So please remember, in all of the exhibition buildings, if you photograph, please don't use a flash on those. And there's one place, room. But scale of deportations here, but also extended beyond the occupied Polish territories approximately. So a year after the country was established, and so after entering, you can see what I am starting to describe, what scale of deportations. You can join us here, so all of us can enter. Scale of deportations grew especially when Auschwitz became one of the places of mass deportations of Jewish people when what took place in Auschwitz what was a part of a broader Nazi policy of what was called the final solution to the Jewish question, what the Nazis would stood for rounding up deportations and mass killings of Jewish people. The final term around, you can see such approximate numbers of the people sent to Auschwitz. The only victims of Auschwitz, they were killed right after arrival without even being registered as prisoners, because among Jewish deportees, the Nazis carried out what was called selection after arrival, when the SS men decided who would become a prisoner and who would be killed right away. So among Jewish people brought to Auschwitz, the great majority were killed on the same day when they arrived in the camp without even being registered as prisoners. So in connection to this mass murder that was carried out in Krakow, you can notice what like a painting, we can see this terror. So in it you can see actually ashes of victims of Auschwitz, some of what was discovered together after the liberation in the Krakow area. You may imagine when the camp existed, the Nazis then ordered the corpse there, typically crematoria ovens. So later ashes were disposed of. For example, ashes were thrown to a nearby river and close proximity to the camp. That was one of ways how ashes were disposed of. So also here, let's notice ahead of you, you can see that photograph and one of the photographs taken by the SS men in Birkenau. You might have seen photographs showing the train tracks leading to the camp in Birkenau. We will see that place where the trains arrived. So we can see one of the photographs taken by the SS men when they photographed an arrival in Birkenau of some transports of Jewish deportees from Hungary. We will see later more of such photographs. They showed us of what exact place we will see later in Birkenau, the place where the Nazis carried out selections among Jewish deportees after their arrival. So we can see this one photograph, but we will see more of such photographs from that collection in Room 3. It was in Poland where the Holocaust, where there was the biggest Jewish population in Europe of over 3 million Polish Jews. But most of the Polish Jews were killed in places other than Auschwitz. For example, other death in Treblinka, Belgrade, Sobibór, Krakow. Let's remember Auschwitz. As the police in Gaza chapters that were burning, the numbers of the people killed were overall Auschwitz was the place in which the largest group of Jewish victims were murdered. Approximately 1 million Jewish victims. So in connection with this, we will see such photographs taken by the SS. Krakow, among people leaving trains, you can notice entire families with their luggage belongings. Let's remember that before their deportation, they were deceived that they were going to be resettled, allegedly, to a new place of living, allegedly a place of resettlement. That was, of course, a lie, a deceit after arriving. They had to leave their belongings that were subsequently stolen, taken away from them. We can see on the photographs also buildings of the crematoria with gas chambers. If you take a look at the second photograph, you can see actually buildings of two crematoria with gas chambers. On the left, on the right, you can see such two buildings with a tall chimney. So two out of four crematoria that stood on Birkenau. Later in Birkenau, we will see their ruins only, as I mentioned earlier. So Jewish deportees, after leaving a train, they had to separate. We can see on the next photograph exactly. Because in one group you can see men standing, in another group you can see women, but also among their children, others with their small children. Let's remember that basically the only reason why they were deported here, that was because they were Jewish, for no other reason, but because they were Jewish. So among the people brought here in such mass transports, you can see the people of different ages, from small children to elderly people. So the Nazis were in the person. So we can see what followed Jewish deportees were welcome to approach an SS man. Typically, that was one of physicians, doctors serving here, among the SS men serving here. He would decide typically in a very quick way by simply looking at a Jewish arrival, by assessing his or her age or physical abilities. He would decide if a person standing before him could be considered fit for the So this is exactly what we saw photographs. You can see on this next photograph what SS man, how he turned his hand to the left or to the right, one of directions to the left or to the right. This meant murder, an immediate murder in a gas chamber. So here specifically, you can see that elderly man undergoing selection, knowing that criteria. If a person could be considered fit for slave labor, you may imagine if he was sent to a group of people, led to one of the gas chambers to be killed right away. So we can see on photographs also how the selection process in the next photograph. You can see actually a group of people probably now that they were led to one of the gas chambers in Birkenau. So here you can see predominantly some children, elderly people, but also in this photograph you can see this woman holding a small child in her hands. Let's remember, some of the Nazis, after an arrival of any transport, they didn't want to cause a panic. For example, they didn't want to forcefully separate mothers and their small children. So we can see after arrival, after selection, both her and her child, like all of those people, we can see them photographed basically in the last moments of their lives. But those people, they were deceived until the very end, we can say. They were deceived, but they were certainly had to take a shower under disinfection. It was somewhat logically after what typically long Harrison deportation, that this would await from allegedly shower disinfection. So let's look at this. We can see again on this photograph the buildings of the crematorium with gas chambers on the left and the right, such buildings with the tall chimneys. Because in Birkenau we will see their ruins only. We can see upstairs their model, what those crematorium buildings looked like before their destruction. So later from here, let's go upstairs.
They were murdered as well.
They were not in this large so Hungarian Jews were the largest group, the Polish Jews were the largest group, the surrounding body of they were not among those main groups of Jewish victims, in Auschwitz specifically. Yeah, of course, every victim matters. We heard about like
They're not even mentioned. All what stuff, they were all brought here, Breslau.
You can see on this map also Breslau, yeah? Also Breslau. One places from which people were.
Because otherwise it makes it sound like all the Germans were all bad and everyone's victims, but the Germans...
Like the Nazis here, however, you can see examples of photographs taken secretly by prisoners from Sonderkommando. You can see such photographs on the walls here, so Sonderkommando. One was a group of some male able-bodied, predominantly Jewish inmates and prisoners from Sonderkommando. They had to work in crematoria. They had to, for example, bury the corpses. So we can see photographs taken secretly by prisoners from Sonderkommando in the vicinity of one of the crematoria in Birkenau. They do such photographs secretly using the pictures. You can see from this photograph, you can see smoke from the building. We can see actually prisoners from Sonderkommando throwing the corpses to a burying pit. Because when such photographs were taken, that was at the time of high intensity of mass killings, when crematoria in Birkenau, they often simply couldn't cope with burying so many corpses. So also the prisoners from Sonderkommando, they had to bury some bodies in such burying pits in open air. So we can see such photographs because they were smuggled outside of the camp using a secret chain of contact that such photographs which the Polish resistance organization outside of the camp. So let's now notice we can see behind the glass what is a model of one of the two types of the crematorium buildings that stood in Birkenau. We can see this model from the left side. From here you can see exactly this whole model. You can try to join us here on the left because from here you can see exactly. If you take a look on the left side, you can see how the victims then would go underground because they entered the undressing room that was underground, but later they entered a shallow room as they were deceived that the gas chamber. You can see also underground what was the gas chamber, what was not gas chambers, that was cycle. On the left side, you can see the pellets of zyklon B. They would evaporate, they would release hydrogen cyanide chemical compound, which led to suffocation of those victims. Hydrogen cyanide. So we can see the gas chamber underground at the ground level. You can see what was the room with ovens. Because after the corpses using an elevator, the corpses were delivered to the crematorium where the prisoners from Sonderkommando they would bury the corpses in ovens and furnaces. As I mentioned later in Birkenau, we will see the ruins of such a building in crematorium of the architecture. So actually, cyclone, what was produced as a pesticide, what is used to get rid of lice, insects, pesticide, but some people of the Nazis, they also started using cyclone for mass killings, homicidal killings in gas chambers. We know that from a post-war testimony by Rudolf Hess, the first commandant of Auschwitz, according to him, approximately 5 to 7 kilograms of cyclone B, that was enough to kill approximately 1,500 people in a gas chamber. When we enter the next exhibition room in it, we are not allowed to photograph just in room.
होता क्या था ना कि जो ह्यूमंस को मैसेकर किया होता था, जिनको मारा होता था, उनके ह्यूमन हेयर निकाल के ना कंपनीज को बेच दिए जाते थे, तो वो उससे जूट वगैरह कपड़े वगैरह बनाते थे। तो this similar to like eating non-vegetarian or meat, like how there are some people who just like वो किल करते हैं एनिमल्स को ये सोच के कि अरे वाह उनमें तो प्रोटीन है, उनमें न्यूट्रिशनल वैल्यू है. क्या ये नाजी थिंकिंग की तरह नहीं है कि उनको मार दिया जाता है जस्ट फॉर देयर वैल्यू? तो ह्यूमन हेयर भी नाजी लोग इसी तरीके से निकाल के उनको बेचते थे इंडस्ट्रीज़ को.
German civilians, German population. So we can say what was the result of such state-organized theft and plunder. And before we enter Block 5, let me also mention Canada, because Canada, what is a nickname that was given to such warehouses in Auschwitz, warehouses with stolen belongings. You may imagine prisoners, they would associate Canada with great wealth. They imagined Canada to be a very rich country, a land of plenty, we can say. So they gave such nickname Canada to such warehouses with a broad range of stolen belongings. So in connection to this, we'll see what exhibition in Block 5.
तो यहाँ पे ना
Those are the examples of the abuse that were stolen, examples of what was discovered in warehouses. What the Nazis didn't manage to send outside the camp before it was liberated. So we will walk through exhibition rooms, but also in the corridor, on the walls in the corridor, we can see photographic documentation of what was discovered in warehouses. What was photographed shortly after Auschwitz had been liberated.
तो ये लोग उनके कपड़े चुरा के, जूते चुरा के सब कुछ नाजीज़ में बेच देते थे. वहाँ पे भी इंडस्ट्रियल.
Also here we can see such examples of prosthetics removed from corpses of the people with disabilities who were killed. That was also a part of such theft in Auschwitz.
तो लोगों का चाहे कुछ भी हो, जूता चप्पल, इवन लंगड़े लोगों का कुछ भी, मतलब उनके बस सहारे, वो भी बेच देते थे. इतना मनी माइंडेड चल रहा था. ओह माय गॉड. ये देखो, ये सब वो सामान है जो उस टाइम पे वेयर हाउसेस से मिला. तो जो भी लोग अपने घर से सामान लाते थे,
Some of you can see already such examples of kitchenware. You can notice they are in different colors. So Jewish people to prepare kosher used to for religious law, they have to know what music so as not to mix salad and food, which is for such a colors of kitchenware that they show what music to prepare kosher use.
जो भी सामान लाते थे उनको ये लोग बेच देते थे.
After seeing this room later, please join us upstairs. We'll later go to room 4 downstairs. Let's walk on the right side.
मैं बोल रहा हूँ। ये जूते देखो, इतने सारे जूते उन लोगों के जिनको मारा गया था, और ये वेयर हाउसेस में मिले इनके। मतलब ये सारे जूते चुरा के, ओह माय गॉड, ये देखो बैग्स, ये देखो इनके बैग्स कैसे आ रहे हैं। ये लोग अपने, मतलब नाज़ी लोग ऐसे डिसेप्शन करते थे ना कि अरे हम लोग आपको कहीं बढ़िया जगह ले जा रहे हैं, कहीं अच्छी जगह डिपोर्ट कर रहे हैं। लोग खुशी खुशी अपने बैग्स में सारा सामान लेके आते थे कि अच्छा चलो ये भी रख लेते, वो भी रख लेते, अपने बच्चों को लेके, ये सोचे कि ट्रिप करने आ रहे। लेकिन डिसेप्शन देखो, चोरी देखो, जो भी वो सामान लाते थे इन बैग्स में भर के, भी सामान लाते थे, जो भी सामान लाते थे बैग्स में भर के, उनको चुरा लेते थे, उनको बेच देते थे, और जर्मन लोगों को ही बेच देते थे या उनमें बांट देते थे। तो इसको चोरी नहीं तो और क्या बोलेंगे, लाइक दिस वाज मास चोरी। सो इट वाज जस्ट मास किलिंग बट ऑल्सो मास चोरी।